I'll go ahead and introduce myself. Hi, y'all. I'm Glenda Jordan. I'm a volunteer for Recovering from Religion. I was asked to help moderate this panel a little last minute, so you'll have to forgive me if I seem a bit unprepared. I'm going to read the description if you're just in here because you wandered in here, I'm going to read the description for this panel. So, a conversation about understanding the threats to our civil rights and reproductive rights, understanding the very real dangers of Project 2025, and highlighting some efforts worth supporting in the fight to preserve those rights. Francie Hunt, raise your hand, please. Francie Hunt is the executive director of Tennessee Advocates for Planned Parenthood, the advocacy and political arm for Planned Parenthood in Tennessee. Francie walked 538 miles across Tennessee from Memphis to Johnson City in pilgrimage and protest for bodily autonomy and abortion rights after Roe v. Wade was overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court. Hell yeah. We stand an absolute badass. Dr. Marisa Richmond, hell yeah, is the founder and first president of the Tennessee Transgender Political Coalition. In 2016, she was appointed to the Metro Human Relations Commission and became the first transgender city board member in Nashville history. She has been a lobbyist. She has been an active advocate and lobbyist for transgender and LGBTQ rights in Tennessee and all over the United States. Thank you so much. And Marissa, I grew up in Murfreesboro, so I grew up on a farm there. Candace, love you. Candace Gorham is a former ordained minister turned therapist, a researcher, author, activist, wonderful human being, and president of the American Humanist Association. For over 80 years, the AHA has promoted a progressive society where being good without God is accepted. Through its defense of civil liberties, secular governance, social justice, scientific integrity, and the promotion of humanist values. Arden Hart, girl, I love you, is badass trans activist. I'm ad-libbing a little. Badass trans activist, head of production at The Line. Hell yeah, if you haven't checked out The Line, we love it. Host of weekly call-in show, the Transatlantic Call-in Show, TACIS for short, TACIS. Speaking to the public on all matters related to trans rights from a compassionate, skeptical, humanist lens, Arden is dedicated to advancing LGBTQ rights in the face of Christian nationalism with reason and open dialogue. I hope y'all are able to catch her talk earlier. It's incredible. I've seen it twice. We love Arden. So I'm just going to get, yes, applause for everybody. Thank you. I'm just going to get right into it. Panelists, will you please, you can go down the line or whoever feels compelled to speak first. Will you tell us a little bit about your backstory and why do you do this work?
Okay, I'll start. I like I said, I used to be a minister. I was a former minister. I was that type of person. I've been like super religious my whole life. Even like as a little kid, I was like the one child that was like, yeah, let's go to church. And so I had that was sort of my background. As I got older, I started getting involved in the more extreme versions of Christianity where we were casting out demons and shouting and talking in tongues and all that tithing and giving till it hurts, all that crazy stuff. And so I went through like a really tough time in my life. I was depressed. All kind of stuff was going wrong. I was in my early mid 20s, and I was super active in my church. I was in the choir. I went 3 nights a week to church, and I felt like something was wrong. Like, why is my life so messed up when I think I'm doing what the Bible tells me to do. What's going on? So I said, maybe I need to back up, take a step, kind of reassess what I believe and why I believe it. Well, as you might imagine, that became a slippery slope where I studied myself right on out of religion.
That's how they get it.
So that's kind of my quick and dirty backstory, and then I wrote a book, and that's how I kind of got involved in the movement. And my research, my earlier days before I got involved with AHA, was about race and religion. So like my first book, the Ebony Exodus Project, was about Black women specifically and who left religion and why and how and their stories basically. So I initially kind of got involved with the music from the perspective, I mean, within the movement from the perspective of like, racial issues and that sort of thing.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Francie Hunt. And, I came to Planned Parenthood, I think, because of the parenthood part of the brand. I think that, as a parent who has now 2 adult children, for a long time, my main interest politically was in helping young people reach their fullest potential. And, that got me really involved with working to improve early education, came to Tennessee to work with a group that was a child advocacy organization. So my work in the reproductive rights movement and reproductive freedom and justice movement is really rooted in this under this foundation of caring for our younger generations and thinking 7 generations forward and how we build communities. I would say that from a religious / non-religious standpoint, I think my values that kind of connect into my political worldview is really rooted in kindness and helping folks find peace with each other while respecting each other as well. And my religious background, I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church, very heavily involved, was the church pianist. That was my job in high school. But I think if I were to describe my religion now or my worldview now, it's kind of like one of those viewfinder clicks. I could click and I could easily see what it was like to have been Christian. And I learned a lot of things from that experience in terms of how to speak in front of crowds and how to talk about things that I care about. If I click it again, I could see myself as an atheist and just feeling like I could just become even more alive and in awe just from understanding our stars and, understanding your gut health. Like it's amazing. And that's enough to inspire me. I could click it again and see through a Buddhist lens and find some inner honesty about what is real to me in that moment so that I can improve and just be present in the moments that I have. So I think that I kind of have a somewhat of an interdisciplinary spiritual view, but that does inform my work. And when I was in my earlier years, I had wanted to become a missionary, and who would have known that I am now? I would consider myself a missionary for bodily autonomy.
Hell yeah.
So
Hell yeah.
So, yeah. So that's me in a nutshell.
Okay, well, I won't rehash the whole thing since I know some of you just saw me kind of go through my whole life story in the previous session, but I grew up in a really small town, very isolated from kind of most of, the world. We went to like a non-denominational sort of charismatic church, and when I came out as trans to my mom as a young teenager, she was awesome and stayed by my side, but we kind of got kicked out of our church, and I feel like I've always had a very strong kind of justice sense in me. Like I really just had bad reactions of seeing people mistreated or not taken care of when we had the ability to take care of them. And so I got lucky to fall in with a great group of people when I was in college, as I was starting to kind of fully come into my own and accept myself for who I was. And they really put me on a good path of feeling like, we can really, when we gather together, we can really do stuff to like address the problems that we have in society. And so I think ever since then, I've always been a really passionate speaker. I want to reach people and convince them that, these are things that they should care about, like trans rights and human rights are things that they should be invested in, because I think they make the world better for all of us, not just the people who you're fighting for. And that goes for pretty much every domain of human rights. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Good afternoon. First off, I'm a native of Nashville. So welcome for those of you from out of town. My parents were both active in the civil rights movement, supporting the students doing the sit-ins, although I was only about 1 or so at the time. So I grew up in an environment of social activism and fighting for social justice. My dad was also a scientist. He taught organic chemistry at Fisk University here in Nashville. And so I grew up in a science background. So although I did go to a church, a Unitarian church, our focus was more on philosophy rather than religious dogma. And for me, the best part of the church was that they served punch and cookies rather than milk and cookies, because to this day, I still don't like milk. Um, but it was years, and so I was actually pursuing an academic career, and in fact, I just retired a year ago from being a professor of U.S. history and women's gender studies from Middle Tennessee State University. I've worn a lot of hats over the years, but it was only as I was kind of a late bloomer and coming out of the closet as a trans woman. And in '96, a friend of mine who had moved to Chicago was very brutally murdered. She was strangled, stabbed 34 times, and then set on fire. And her murder is still unsolved to this day. And after her funeral, I was standing there at her grave in tears, and I said, I can't solve this crime. I can't bring you back. But I can try to do with my privilege to make sure this never happens to anyone else ever again. I'm going to do what I can to change the world, and I've been committed to social justice, especially for trans people, ever since, and that's 30 years ago.
Wow, that got me choked up. That was astounding. What do you say to people who say that we're exaggerating the harm that we see happening and on the horizon? How do you respond to people who dismiss you're just making a big deal out of it? I know it's hard. It's like, yeah.
I'm seeing friends leaving the state of Tennessee and even leaving the country.
I did.
And it's really sad every time I see someone say, I have to save myself. I have to save my children. This is ridiculous. We're supposed to be the land of the free, land of equal opportunity, equal protection of the laws is the language in the Constitution. And nobody should ever feel that they have to give up on this country to live free. And yet a lot of people are doing that. And if people can't see that, then I'm not going to waste my time trying to open their eyes. If they are willing to listen, as an educator, I'm willing to teach them, but they have to be willing to open their minds and open their hearts. And if they are willing to do that, I'm willing to sit down and work with them.
There used to be a time where within the repro movement here in Tennessee, we would be gaslit. We would hear oh, well, don't worry, it won't ever get banned in Tennessee, even if they pass this trigger ban, even if they pass the 6-week, even if they pass a 20-week ban, because we have Roe v. Wade and that will never go away.
They were saying this in 2015
Yeah.
before, and we were like, if this happens, they will come for Roe, and do not assume that this is set in stone. Do not assume that this is right. And then it happened. Like, there's only so many times I can say, I told you so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now we're not even gaslit anymore, which is a different kind of a problem, because now I think, oh, wow, it's really bad. And everybody else goes, yes, it's really bad. Like, where's my gaslighters to be like, it's not that bad. But yeah, I think that it's a different kind of a situation now, because, as dismal as I see it, as an organizer, it's the challenge is that we are professional hope dealers, because you have to motivate people to take action. And I think the tone and the flavor of hope right now is not a be optimistic. It's a, as Mariam Kaba says, hope is a discipline. And it means that it's, hope is not a mood, it's not a feeling, it's not an emotion. Hope is a discipline. We have to show up and just do it. Put one foot in front of the other, be present in this moment, and do the things that we know we have to do. And so I think the gift to me is, I have not observed anybody saying that it's not that bad. I'm seeing folks being scared and asking what can I do right now, which is both encouraging but also, scary.
It's scary. Yeah, it's scary.
Even if they're not saying, that they're scared, I feel like there's a lot of people who are just willing to defend the worst atrocities of the things we're seeing.
Oh.
As we're seeing immigrants being brought to a prison camp that they've labeled like it's Disney, the alligator Alcatraz, where their lights are being on 24 hours a day. There's maggots in the food.
Yeah,
mean-
did y'all know that? I didn't know that was the actual literal name of it. I thought that was a nickname, Alligator Alcatraz. No, that is the actual literal name, and they're literally selling merch for it. The official United States government is selling merch for Alligator Alcatraz.
Yeah,
It's,
I think I'm hung up on how do we address now, though. I don't know that I figured out how to navigate the conversations where people are just proudly willing to say, no, I'm okay with that. That's where those people should be. That is definitely a different beast than the gaslighters.
Not to mention what that would do to the Everglades.
I mean, every
Yeah.
layer of that.
Yeah, I'll chime in and say, like, I don't have a whole lot of people in my world who are like actively, denying it, but I do understand that there are plenty of people who do, and I think part of the problem is bubbles. People live in their own bubbles. People, the algorithms guide them to, confirmation information, and then they don't think anything of it. If all you watch is Fox News, then somebody was saying in one of the other talks about, then you're gonna believe that, oh, they're just deporting rapists, because that's what they say
That's what
on
they say.
Fox. But once you get outside of that bubble is when you start getting different types of information. So I think part of the problem is people being in their own bubbles. Now I do remember this guy. It was November, so it was after the election, but prior to the inauguration. And we were talking to this guy about, oh my God, it's gonna be so bad, and Project 2025. And he was like, it's not gonna be that bad, and it's not gonna go down. And he was coming up with all the reasons why he didn't think that they would really be able to implement the things in Project 2025. And I remember me, you know what I'm talking about, Deanna, my daughter, all of us were just like, what? This is a black guy too. And we were like, what? You really believe this? And, and we were like, nah, I think they're going to do it. They're going to implement Project 2025. And so I would be interested to talk. I haven't heard from him since then, but I hope I may have an opportunity to see him in November of this year again, because I want to know what he got to say.
Yes,
I will tell y'all when he tells me, because I want to know what in the world made you think that they were not serious about what they were saying they were going to do.
I would like an apology for the emotional labor of you telling me I was overreacting. I think we all here had that experience of like, this is going to be awful. And before it happened, like, it's not going to be that bad. And I want to find each one of those people, like, somehow make a time machine that gives me back whatever that hour-long conversation I had to have with you. I want that time back because now I'm mad.
One of my favorite things, one of my all-time favorite things is watching people who voted for Trump cry about the fact that they didn't know it was going to be like, I'm just like, here's my glass. Let me collect every one of your little tulips. Like, you didn't know. I love it.
Have y'all have ever checked out the subreddit Leopards Ate My Face? It's a really tasty, strong subreddit right now. Well, how do y'all feel the Christian nationalist movement and MAGA overlap? And is there any way that you see it not overlapping in a weird, unique way? But mostly, how do those two movements align with each other?
I'll talk a little bit more about this in my workshop in the next session. But for me, within the reproductive rights arena, the overlap is really between the white Christian nationalists, the white Christian supremacists, and the pronatalist movement. And so, and I think where there's going to be tension even within that arena. And let me describe that for a second. So here in Tennessee, how many people are here from Tennessee? Okay, so majority of folks. So, here in Tennessee, we have a right-wing supermajority in every, branch of government. And many of those folks in power are really motivated from a Christian supremacist slant. It's not just, your business Republican or whatever. And that has informed a lot of laws that impact bodily autonomy, whether it's abortion rights to gender affirming care, LGBTQ issues, like all of those things which are directly connected to our ability to make decisions around our own bodies. Those things are under attack from a very religious perspective. But then the pronatalist perspective is really interesting, because those are the folks that are like, Elon Musk, or some folks that really believe that we're going to have, because of population decline, they're really worried about population decline, that we're not going to be able to have a strong economy. And so that we're going to face an economic collapse by not being able to replace the current population, so that, the younger generations can pay for the, Social Security and the elderly generation. But also, a strong GDP necessitates growth all the time. That's just kind of how we built. I will not take ownership of that, but like how the billionaire class has kind of crafted our economy. And so that's a big challenge. And so they really want folks to procreate, not necessarily from a, go ye therefore, kind of like a biblical procreation, but really there's an idea that a lot of your ideas are based on how your families have raised you. And so one way to ensure that your ideas live on into future generations is to also procreate. So it's a very kind of interesting view, but we're going to start seeing some conflict there when we talk about like in vitro fertilization and other kinds of repro technology, because there's different definitions. Well, not different definitions. The pronatalists care probably less around like, a fertilized egg than the white Christian supremacists. So that's kind of what we're observing in that movement right now, which is interesting.
I think when it comes to like trans rights and LGBT rights, to the extent that there is some difference between the MAGA and the Christian nationalist movement, I don't know that it actually matters. The functionally what the outcomes that they're advocating for are all the same, trying to reduce people down to the genitals that you might have had at birth, and that determining, what kind of public spaces you can access and what kind of accommodations you can access. I think potentially it matters as a difference on how you reach them for kind of bringing them out of that to a certain extent. I think similarly, the MAGA people maybe care less on a deep divine edict that man and woman need to be this way. And it's more of a sort of cultural disgust and aversion to queerness. But it is functionally, in my view, not different in the outcomes that they're advocating for, and kind of how at least I tend to approach those conversations.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, last year during the Democratic convention, I was the unofficial chair of the transgender delegates. There were 45 of us, so it was a record number for any political group and any political convention. And so I spoke actually at 2 of the meetings during the convention week in Chicago. Both times I introduced myself being from the fascist theocracy of Tennessee, because I pointed out Project 2025 was already a reality here and had been for years.
Yes. Yeah.
One time I was at a committee hearing, and I don't even remember what bill was coming up, but the chair, as he was starting the meeting, insisted that everybody say the words "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance. Because after all, freedom of religion, separation of church and state doesn't apply in this state. And so they've been pushing a Christian nationalist agenda in this state in particular for a long time. And even the New York Times recognized that Tennessee has passed more culture wars laws than any single state in the country. And as an educator, before I retired, I was teaching both African American history and LGBTQ history, and I introduced my classes at the beginning of each semester, telling my students they were now taking an illegal class because Tennessee has passed a divisive concept law which allows students to report professors. And I would, by the way, pass on that email to make sure they saw it so they could report me. Um, but anyway, they would say, we thought that was Florida and Texas. I was like, no, it's here too.
It's here.
And so, we've been dealing with this, and Francie and I both have been sort of on the front lines of the battle in this state. We've been dealing with this here for a number of years, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And now the rest of the country is experiencing what we're dealing with here. And they're pushing, so again, there is an intersectionality between MAGA and Christian nationalism, but they're basing their rationale and their excuses on religion. And of course, the constitutional separation of church and state means absolutely nothing to them.
I'm really glad you brought that up. Again, I grew up in Murfreesboro. I went to Las Casas Elementary School and then Siegel High School. And in my elementary school, we had abstinence-only classes. I was in a public taxpayer-paid school, and we had abstinence-only taught by Christian educators that came into the school. And that was there's no separation of church and state. You were not allowed to not say the Pledge of Allegiance. If you didn't say under God, you were going to get in trouble. We had prayer time in school, because who are you going to complain to? The principal, he's Christian. You're going to go above them, they're Christian. You're going to go above them, and each one of these levels of Christianity are all, if y'all don't know the word dominionist, it's probably one of the most important words that you're not using if you're not using it already. Dominionist means God's law above human law. And most dominionists don't use that word for themselves. That's just how it's supposed to be. So all churches are going to vote. And when my mother ran for Senate in Tennessee, you're not legally allowed, pastors are not legally allowed to tell their congregations to vote for. Of course they fucking did. Of course they did. Don't vote for that atheist. So
when we had the marriage amendment on the ballot in 2006, I was the state field coordinator for the Vote No campaign. And we discovered during early voting that a lot of the precincts in Tennessee were churches. And under Tennessee law, you can't campaign within 100 feet of the door. Well, they were putting bulletins on the bulletin board while you're standing in line saying vote yes on one. And so we started getting reports all across the state, because I said, if you see anything, call me, and here's my number. And my phone was ringing throughout that entire 2 weeks of early voting. And I said, oh crap, we're going to get our butts kicked.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, there's no separation. What tactics do y'all feel are being used the most by the MAGA and Christian nationalist movement? And how do we push back? I know it's a big one.
I mean, they've got a really strong ground game. They'll helicopter in huge forces of canvassers during election periods, and year round at that. They already have. I mean, the church structure itself is a relational organizing infrastructure. I mean, the amount of commitment that it requires to show up twice on Sundays and Wednesday night fellowship hall and fellowship meetings and Thursday night training unions and youth groups on Friday, like that is huge. So that's one tactic that it's challenging for us to be able to organize at that scale, because really any great organizing has to include relational organizing. It has to be beyond the issue itself that you're fighting for. It has to be like in rooms like this where people get to know each other and we are committed to being, in relation over the long haul. So I think that's one big thing. And then, I mean, this is even above the grassroots level, but like the level of disinformation and happening, that is way out of control. That's really challenging, where people can't even trust the information that they're getting, and they can't trust government, and they can't trust all of these necessary institutions. And so again, that's where this relational organizing, so that we all know we can go to NaNoCon to get information, or we can go to Planned Parenthood, or whatever other organizations there are.
NPR, but they're all losing funding.
Right. So that is another big tactic, which is to make our sources of information suspect.
I think also to build on that, like, their misinformation isn't just something that they're putting out there. This is funded massively. They have so many organizations pouring millions and millions and millions of dollars into the pockets of all of these different, far right content creators who are really helping entrench these misinformation narratives that people are getting locked into. So it's not just a misinformation war, but those people putting out that misinformation are rolling in money that organizations are happy to give to them. I mean, including, I think it was last year in the middle of the election cycle, one of those big right-wing organizations was exposed for taking money from Russia Today, the Russian state media organization. It was like I don't want to say billions of dollars because I don't actually remember if that's true, but it was a massive lump sum of money that all of these creators were getting because they were already happily ready to promote those ideas. So it's like they find these people who already kind of are on that side of the misinformation and they say, yes, more of it, do more of it. We will give you as much money as you need to keep screaming that narrative from the rooftops. And we just have no infrastructure like that on the left to even remotely compete on that ball game.
Right. We don't have this utopian leftist country somewhere donating billions of dollars to us to like make our little fun videos. Yeah, it's really
Also
scary.
very good at organizing at the local level. They've taken over school boards and city councils and county commissions. Right here in Middle Tennessee, we've had local school boards ban Wicked, ban Calvin and Hobbes.
How dare he?
Right here in Middle Tennessee. And so we've got to start recruiting candidates, and our school board primaries are coming up in May, and the school board general elections in August next year. So we need to start that recruitment now to get people who are committed to education, who are committed to literacy and committed to free thought. Because if not, they're going to continue dominating at that local level. Those local school boards are stepping stones to state legislatures and Congress. And so we've got to build that bench right in each and every one of our communities. And we've got to do that now.
Yeah, to kind of build off of that, you said they've got a good ground game. They've got a good long game. We're like 50 years behind these people. They've been planning and working this stuff out and coming together and strategizing since like Billy Graham, and they've been for decades. They've been slowly cultivating the people that they're going to use. They've been slowly, like you said, slowly taking over school boards, taking over all the little local things, and they hit the jackpot with Donald Trump, who finally it was like, yes, now this is what we've been working for. So I think that's what they've got going for them, that they're just light years ahead of us in terms of the conniving thoughts that they had going all along. We're here just like, hey, how do we help, people live good lives? But they're like, how do we take over this shit?
How do we hurt as many people as possible? And if you ask, and there's a lot of white supremacists and MAGA nationalists who you can ask them, they will literally tell you the reason they're doing what they're doing is because they want people to be hurt. That was that one woman who, it's the leopards ate my face, and her husband was being deported or something was happening. She was like, they're not hurting the right people. It's the cruelty is the point. It's about the suffering. And so on that, So I think it's because they're just a bunch of fucking assholes who are high school bullies and they never grow past that. But what do you feel is the catalyst for their actions by these movements?
I feel like you can't separate it from religion. You just can't, because or money. You can't separate it from money.
Or
either.
money.
Money and religion. Yeah, exactly. Like they've been, the Bible says the things that it say, and people believe it and they operate based on that. But then you add in there a little bit of greed, and you've got a recipe for people who are willing to do any and everything that they possibly can to get their agenda met.
To keep them, which is why we've seen there have been some, historically they voted Democrat, but there are some millionaires and even billionaires out there who voted for Trump because they don't like their greed corrupts and puts worms in your brain and makes you delulu.
And look how that's paid out for them. I mean, a lot of them had massive gains in their net worth over the course of like that time between the election and like the inauguration. And I know it's fluctuated since because Trump's insane tariff nonsense has really made our economy unstable. But it has paid out for them in a lot of ways.
I'll tell you, when 2016 happened, I was so flabbergasted. I'll choose to use that word. You know, that like for 4 years, I could hardly make eye contact with people. You know what
No,
I
I
mean?
remember. Yeah,
'Cause
I
it
think we all felt that
it
way.
wasn't
Yeah.
so much like who won. It was like, what does this mean about the people that I'm around?
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? But this time around, I'm kind of like getting in there. Like I'm like, when you're like really cleaning stuff, you get that toothbrush and you're like getting all the grime out. Like I'm getting in there. And it was interesting. There was one right wing, like it was a pronatalist group, and they're like, he meant the conservatives. We've got the liberals dialed in. Like our polls are right on them. We know everything about them, but they always get us wrong. And it's because they never take the time to understand why we think what we think. They think they mischaracterize us and think that we're just some sort of cartoon figure. So what's been interesting for me this go around is I've kind of rolled up my sleeves to get in to kind of understand, like, what is it? Is it just that they're evil? Is it just that they have a different view of God? And some of that's yes, some of that's that. But like it was like when I actually listened to the 3-hour interview of Trump on Joe Rogan.
Oh God, how
which
did
I
you?
normally would not have done, but I was like, I really want to, and I was like, I get it. I understand. I see what they're seeing, because there's something about like, even though we might think it's ludicrous, like there's something imaginative about like, we're going to go to Mars. We're going to get Greenland.
Sure, and we'll have
Right.
pizza every Friday, and it's
Right.
going to be free. And
Yeah. And so I'm like, oh, I get it. It's like, it's a capturing of the imagination. And so it's like, as an organizer, I'm thinking like, what are we doing to capture the imagination? Because it's like, just to be able to control my own body, that's like baseline. Like, that's like fundamental. It's like, how do we think bigger about recreating our communities so that we really have healthy foods, we have really great education in a visionary way that's inspiring. And so I've just been kind of mulling that over and figuring out like how to incorporate that and not motivating only folks out of all of the tragedy and things that are happening, but like never losing sight of like, what is the kind of world we really want to live in? Where it's like we center it on love, like the fact that are out of the White House, they could put a despicable video about Obama, like unacceptable, like absolutely, like that just shows you how terrible it has gotten. Like that, like where have we gone? Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? Okay, yeah. So
I don't know that one, but I know when they were.
of where Obama was, the AI video of Obama being arrested.
Yeah.
Oh God,
Yeah,
I saw
like
the.
that really crossed a line.
I saw the ASMR
Yeah.
where it's like immigrant ASMR, and it was people in chains, and then using the Studio Ghibli filter to make cartoons of people crying in detention centers, like with heart emojis, and it's like I'm sick to my stomach.
It is. It's sickening. And so it's like, I feel like, we have to be militantly loving, like militantly, kind. Like we've got to figure out a way without, being like, oh, it's okay for everybody to behave the way they are. Like, there has to be a boundary and protection for people.
It's called
as well.
do no harm but take no shit.
Yeah. Yes.
is the
Thank you.
phrase.
Very good. Very good. Yeah.
I think that something I love about like Zoran Mamdani, for example, who just won the primary for the New York mayor, is he's really delivering kind of a similar left version, I think, of what you're talking about. It's not necessarily about having policies, I think, that are attainable. I think sometimes on the left, we get really preoccupied with what can we do? We want to give you guys realistic stuff. But what Zoran Mamdani did, I think, is he did deliver that story, that what is the vision of what we want America to be? Like even if we can't get it in his term or in our lifetime, what is the direction that we're moving ourselves toward? And I think he really delivered on that in a way that I think is a big part of what we're missing here. We're not having that bigger story that people can be like, yeah, we're moving us towards the Star Trek luxury gay space communism future that we all want so badly.
Well, and some of them, if you've ever seen the comics or memes, where it's like, this is the future the left wants, and it's like abortion stands next to taco stands next to like free weed. I'm like, this looks awesome.
Yeah,
I don't know about. I want to live here. I don't. What about this is not great? Like yeah. Well, we probably have time for one more question. And I think we should end it on this one, is that some people ask where the overlap between atheism and non-belief and human rights causes like the LGBTQ movement, women's movement, abortion access, climate change, etc. Are we weakening the atheist cause by aligning with these other movements?
No.
No way.
Yeah, no, right?
But we also need to be careful not to be complacent as well. Back in March, all over the country, we had Transgender Day of Visibility events, and I posted a flyer for the Nashville event on the Nashville Atheist Facebook page, and someone said, "Oh, I see we're going woke here now."
Oh my
This
God.
is on a Nashville Atheist page, and so I said, "Well, thank you for reminding us that there's transphobia in the atheist community." So then the person turned and started attacking me personally. So we as a community, regardless of what label you want to apply to yourself, we in the secular, et cetera, community, we have to stand for everybody's rights, human rights for all, and not allow that sort of bigotry to go unchallenged within our own community.
Which, if y'all aren't aware, it is a massive problem. If you didn't listen to Arden's talk, transphobia, biphobia, non-binary people freaking out about the fact that sex and gender is a spectrum is a real phenomenon within the atheist community, and we need to do better. And I highly recommend watching her talk. Been on RFRX and American Atheist, and so there are a lot of them, Dawkins being one of them, who, sorry, I've thrown out the name, want to say that we are diluting the movement by having these human rights cause, and no, we should just be concentrating on separation of church and state and not understanding how holistically human rights causes work, that they're all linked to each other.
There's enough organizations out there. There's a big enough pie that if your organization doesn't want to focus on trans rights, fine, go focus on church-state separation, but don't try to bring down the people who are trying to focus on those things. So I could, as the president of an organization where we've got very wealthy donors who have very strong opinions about things. There absolutely are people out there who are worried about mission creep. They're like, the mission of our organization, or the mission of this organization, or the mission of this, philosophical stance or whatever is ABC. But we're going to get away from that, and then that, and so there's this worry that there's not enough of us to do all the work. Like there are enough of us to do all the work, and we don't have to take away from somebody else's rights in order for us to continue to focus on science and, all those things that I love, but that may not motivate somebody,
Planned Parenthood got accused of mission creep this year because earlier this year during the legislative session, there was a bill that was going to not allow undocumented children to go to our public schools. And there was a large coalition of many different organizations that got together and said, no, children, it's in everybody's interest just as humans to make sure that any young person gets an education, one could argue.
What a shock.
And so we signed on to that. We have internally to Planned Parenthood, we have a program called Raiz, and we have Spanish-speaking organizers that go into community. And so it kind of fit with us, but we had to explain to folks, they're like, oh, well, you're doing that as Planned Parenthood just because it's a good idea. And it's like, well, yes, it is a good thing that we're taking a stand on, but we don't take stands on every good thing. We just, to your point, we only have so much, bandwidth. So we're doing it, yes, because it's the right thing to do, and because it's about power building. These are communities that are our patients. These are communities where we actually do have to shift the narrative and the voting culture in this state. And so it was also a strategic move to stand in allyship with communities that were being harmed. So I think that's just another way to think about it from a strategic standpoint.
I think once we have human rights secured in law, when we have all those things we all wanting so bad, I am so down for us to all have petty fights about mission creep all day long. Let's do it. But right now, think we've got some bigger demons to fight, and I think we are going to be a lot stronger working together than trying to divide ourselves along really silly lines.
Yeah, that was Seth Andrews posted something and a transphobe showed up, and I think my response is I am begging on my hands and knees to please find better problems. I wish I could live your life where that's my problem, is that a trans person is just existing. God, I would give anything for that existence, but that's what I fucking care about. Any last thoughts? Because we have about 4 minutes.
So I hope some of you might run for office. If you know, we're talking about power building, you know,
Please don't
think
be
about your
scared.
community. You know, we do need leaders. And you don't have to run for office to be a community leader. You can just reach out to folks on your block and make sure that they're you to go door to door and ask if they're registered to vote. And you can pick up voter registration forms, you know, have conversations. Like that's like at its cellular level, like that's what democracy is about, is having conversations with people who may or may not be like you and talk with folks, you know? So yeah, I wouldn't be an organizer with myself if I didn't put a little next step out there for you.
Well, thank you so much to our panelists. I really appreciate y'all coming out and talking to us.